Today, I want to highlight an important aspect of understanding the difference between drama and other forms of literature. Poetry and fiction are finished products that we read more or less in the form they were published. Yes, we say that readers interpret or bring poems to life by reading them, but every person who reads the poem The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost reads the same words. This is not exactly the case with plays. They were written in order to be performed in a theater, on a stage. They are a step in the process. Plays are a step in the process to a finished product, which is a performance, a production. Each production, each time the play is performed by a different group of people in a different theater, it looks different. If we get together and put on Romeo and Juliet, it will not look the same as a professional company. And a professional theater's production of Romeo and Juliet today would not look the same as a performance of the play in Shakespeare's time, when there was no electricity for lights and the roles of women were performed by boys. So this is the basic fact about drama. It was written in order to be performed, not just read. It was written in order to be performed. In order to understand this basic fact, I want to tell you about some of the things producers, directors, and actors need to think about when they are performing a play. The assignment for this class will be to watch a production of Trifles, and I'll ask you to notice the decisions that the people make during this production have decided while putting it on, while performing it. So before I go on, maybe write in the Anoto panel about what decisions you think people need to make when they put on a play. What do you need to think about before you put on a play? So let me tell you about some of them. Not all of them, some of the most important ones. You need to edit the text. Sometimes a new production adds something to the text to make it more clear or to infuse the play with new relevance. Sometimes you add new jokes into old comedies to make it relevant to the audience. Sometimes the productions delete some of the scenes for brevity's sake to make it shorter, or because they are not appropriate for a particular audience. If you're putting a play up for children, maybe you want to delete some of the more sexual or violent scenes. Of course, plays are sometimes translated, and then that adds another layer of interpretation to the text. Casting. Casting is the question, who's going to play each character? There are a lot of decisions and considerations that go into that aspect. Are you going to find actors who look the part or not consider how they look? Today, it's quite common in some circles to cast plays with no regard to the actor's race. So even if it's a play that happens in medieval Europe, you might cast an African American. Maybe the actor's gender can be different from the characters. That's what happened in Shakespeare's time. Will the same actor play more than one role, more than one part? Sometimes there aren't enough actors in the company, so minor roles are played by the same actor. Sometimes this doubling has thematic importance, connecting two characters by having one actor play both of them. In a recent production of Frankenstein, the actor Benedict Cumberbatch played Victor Frankenstein, the scientist, one evening, and the next evening he played the monster that scientist created. And the other actor, less famous, played the other role. So that's an interesting decision by the producers. Set. The set is what you put on stage to give a sense of place and maybe a sense of reality to the play, to give us a sense of where the play is taking place. So is it going to be sparse and just put a number of things on stage and leave a lot of room for the imagination? Or do you want it to be super detailed, to be very realistic, to be like if the play takes place in a forest, you want all the trees to look like actual trees. If it takes place in a living room, you're going to bring in real furniture from that period and make it seem like the characters are really in a living room. So, which direction are you going to take it? Should the set fit the historical period of the play, or are you going to modernize it? How closely do you want to follow the stage directions? A lot of the time, the playwright will give you detailed directions about what should be on stage, but you don't always need to follow it. In Trifles, the play we read, you would only need one set, because the entire play only happens in one place, in one room, in the kitchen. But a longer play may need a number of sets, and then you have to make these decisions about all of the sets. So before moving forward, write in a note what pieces of furniture you think are crucial for putting on the play Trifles. So what wouldn't you want to forget to put on stage if you're putting on the play? What's really important for actually having the play produced? Next up is costumes and props. Costumes are what the actors wear, and props is things that they can hold in their hands. Things like a sword or a gun or a lamp or some food, as we will see in Oscar Wilde. The questions are very similar for those of the set. Do you want them to be realistic or more symbolic and sparse? But we can have very realistic or elaborate, very complicated costumes and props, and a bare stage. For instance, in Shakespeare's time, the stage was pretty empty most of the time. There wasn't that much scenery, but they did have very, very fancy and elaborate costumes. So you would see a very well-dressed king, but you wouldn't see the king's hall. Before moving forward, choose one character from Trifles and write how you imagine them dressed. Another issue to think about is music and sound effects. Music can often shape our mood or interpretation of the scene. A sad melody might make us feel sad, a happy one might make us feel happy. So we can ask how much, in what ways will we use music at all? You can have an entire play with no music. You can have music running throughout the play. Would you use well-known melodies or something that is new or unknown, famous songs, or something that you would commission for the play itself? So just before starting to talk about music, I put on the Gymnopédie by Eric Satie, the French composer. This melody is often used in film. How did it make you feel? Often it's used to make the audience feel that something sad or at least very melancholy is happening. Maybe you don't want to use music and only let the words of the play shape how we feel about the characters and the scenes. And there are also the issue of sound effects. If the characters are talking about thunderstorms, should the audience hear a thunder too? Or just imagine it? Sometimes stage directions call for specific sound effects, like the sound of war horns or a gunshot in the distance. Will you try to be as close to the playwright's request or do something else? Something we don't always notice is lighting. Are we using natural light from the sun and hoping for the best and, that it won't rain, as they did in Shakespeare's time? If the play is indoors, like most modern plays today, how are we going to light the stage? Should the lighting be bright so we see the entire stage equally? Should it be dark to create an atmosphere of mystery and horror? Right? You help interpret the play with the lighting, just like any other decision I described it. Do you want to put a spotlight, like a bright light, only on one certain actor to show that they are the important one right now, to give the sense that they are alone, right? We use the word spotlight in everyday English to say something like highlight or emphasize. In the theater, you actually use the spotlight to emphasize a specific location on stage or a specific actor. These are all decisions you have to make as the director or the producer of the play. Before moving forward to the last item on my list today, I want to emphasize that while some of these decisions I discuss here are usually made for the production as a whole, if you have a natural light from the sun, then that's what you have. Usually, when you cast someone for a role, he's going to act that character throughout the play. Other decisions are made from scene to scene, from moment to moment. For instance, one scene may require that the whole stage be lighted equally, but when all the other actors leave and we are only left with one actor, maybe we want to use the spotlight to highlight that he's alone. Or the music, of course, changes from scene to scene according to the mood you want to create. Nowhere is this decision from moment to moment, from scene to scene, more important, from line to line, more important than in acting, the last issue I want to talk about. So acting is possibly the most important aspect of interpreting a play for performance. We sometimes call actors performers. And we'll talk about it more in the future, I hope. People study acting for years. It's a whole discipline, and it's difficult to talk about it briefly. For now, notice how actors need to decide how to deliver their lines, with what emotions and with what intensity. Will they speak like everyday people, or are they going to do something more intense, something dramatic than we usually see in everyday life? Sometimes stage directions are going to say something like with anger or nonchalantly. But even those tags are up for interpretation. You can be angry quietly or you can be angry very loudly. And there's room for the actor to interpret it. And each time you see a play, the actor is going to interpret each and every line differently. So as you see, producers, directors, actors have lots and lots of decisions to make. Unless they make these decisions, they cannot actualize, cannot make real, cannot perform the play and bring it its full life on stage. You can't decide not to decide. When you're reading, you can say, I'm not going to think about how the lighting looks in this scene. I don't need to think how angry the characters sound. You can, but you don't have to. If you're producing a play, you have to decide. You must have actors. You can't just decide not to cast an actor. And not having music is also a kind of decision. You decided not to have music. When we read the plays at home, we need to remember that what we are reading is something that was made for production, something with the potential to be a stage production. Part of our work as readers can be, if we choose, is to think how these things would look on stage.